Dan Goldman leaned forward, locked eyes, and asked a question that instantly shifted the entire room. It sounded simple, almost too simple, but the way Kash Patel reacted told everyone watching that this was not going to be a normal exchange. There was a pause, a slight hesitation, and then the kind of answer that raises more questions than it resolves. And in that moment, what should have been a routine hearing turned into something far bigger. Because this wasn't just about documents, or legal technicalities, or procedure.
Mr. Goldman. Mr. Patel, does Donald Trump appear anywhere in the Epstein files?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
It's not a complicated question. Does Donald Trump appear anywhere in the Epstein files?
I didn't say it was a complicated question. I just didn't hear you, so my apologies. We have released where President Trump's name's in the Epstein files and everybody else, and all credible information that we are legally allowed to release has been released.
All right, so let's go through that. You're referring to court orders that prohibit you from releasing grand jury testimony under Rule 6E. Is that what you're referring to when you say as the law allows?
That's a piece of it.
Really? What other evidence do those three court orders you cited prohibit from being released?
Information that was collected pursuant to those search warrants that were limited in fashion.
Wrong. That's not what the court order says, and that's not under 6E.
And you're talking, and I said that's 6E, and I said there was others, and I'm answering that. There are sealed court order documents. There are protective orders.
They are unsealed as part of discovery given to Ghislaine Maxwell. They are no longer sealed.
That's just not true. We can argue about it all you want.
Okay, well, you agree that there are, so your testimony here is that the reason why you are not releasing all of the videos that you have acknowledged, there are so many, and that the FBI spent thousands of hours of reviewing, the photographs, the photographs that you have. You're saying that you're not releasing those because there's a court order requiring them to be sealed? Is that your testimony?
Never said that about the videos. On the totality of the videos, of the thousands of images that were seized pursuant to the search warrants executed at the time, the overwhelming majority of that video is pornographic material that was downloaded from the internet and child sexual abuse material. We will never release that.
Well, as you should not release the victims. But if there are videos that relate to others who Epstein trafficked to, such as maybe Prince Andrew, or photographs, that you have total control to release.
Yes, and if it exists...
And so why haven't you released it?
Why are you supposing that that is a fact when in fact it is false? Are you saying that...
You're saying that none of the videos relate to anything relevant to the Jeffrey Epstein trafficking ring?
Every single video that we have collected pursuant to the prior search warrants has been examined for the last 10 years. And every single video has been utilized for whatever prosecutions were able to be legally brought.
I'm not asking about prosecutions. I'm asking about why you aren't releasing the full Epstein files, including the names of people who were involved in the sex ring that you promised to do before you became FBI director.
I just told you, I'm not going to release downloaded porn of
I'm
children
not asking
on the
about
internet.
that. Fine. I'm asking about all the other files.
What other videos? Tell me. Tell me.
That's what I'm asking.
Tell me.
You're saying there are no videos that would be relevant to anyone else involved in the Jeffrey Epstein sex ring.
Pursuant to Mr. Acosta's collection of information based on the search warrants. That's all we have in our possession.
And I'm asking you, that stuff.
That's all we got.
I'm not asking all you got. I'm asking you, in that stuff, there's nothing that's related to any other sex traffic, any other people engaged with Epstein in underage sex.
That's correct. To my knowledge, no.
Okay. Let's talk about the witness interviews. 302s of witness interviews. Those are not subject to the court order. Those are not subject to any fictional sealed order for a search warrant. Why aren't you releasing those with the redacted names of the victims?
We are releasing as much as legally allowed. That's why we went back to the courts.
How is that not legally allowed?
Sir, do you know how court orders work? Do you know how protective orders work?
Actually,
you know
Mr. Patel, I was a real prosecutor for 10 years. I know exactly how
so I was a
court
fake
orders.
one?
And I want to understand what the court order prevents you from releasing witness statements that the FBI took.
You should know that as a real prosecutor, when the court hand downs a protective order and a motion to seal, the material is sealed unless
So
that
your
judge
testimony
waives
here
it.
is that all of those witness statements are under a court order, a protective order.
We are providing everything we can legally provide.
No, that's not my question.
Congress has
My
subpoena-
question is, why are those witness statements that are not grand jury testimony, that if they were under a protective order are no longer under a protective order, why are they not being released?
How are they not under a protective
Why
order?
are you not going to the court like you did for the grand jury testimony to unseal those
The
records?
DOJ did go to the court.
No, not on those records. Why aren't you going?
gentleman.
You just went on grand jury.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The
You are hiding the Epstein files,
time
Mr.
of the
Patel.
gentleman has expired.
You are part of the cover-up.
Can I respond?
You sure can.
Any allegations that I'm a part of a cover-up to protect child sexual trafficking and victims of human trafficking and sexual crimes is patently and categorically false, and the work of my
So I hope you will talk to them when they
Gentlemen's
have
time has
requested
expired.
to speak with you. Because the
Gentlemen's time has
victims have
expired. Gentleman
requested
yields
and you are
back.
not responding to them.
It was about whether the public has been told the full story about Jeffrey Epstein, or whether key pieces are still being kept out of sight. And what happened next only made that question harder to ignore. The tension didn't build slowly, it hit all at once. Dan Goldman went straight to the point, asking whether certain names appeared in the Epstein files. No build-up, no soft introduction, just a direct question that demanded a clear answer. But instead of a yes or no, Patel pivoted, repeating that everything legally allowed had already been released. It sounded official, carefully worded, and safe. But Goldman didn't let it slide. He immediately started breaking that statement apart, piece by piece, challenging the idea that legal limitations were the real reason information wasn't being made public. And that's when the exchange stopped feeling like a standard hearing and started feeling like something else entirely. A clash between two people who clearly saw the situation in completely different ways. What made this moment stand out wasn't just the disagreement. It was the confidence behind it. Goldman wasn't speculating. He leaned on his experience, making it clear he understood exactly how these legal processes work. When Patel referenced court orders and protections, Goldman pushed back instantly, suggesting that those explanations didn't apply the way Patel was presenting them. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just a steady escalation. And as the back and forth continued, it became clear that this wasn't just about interpreting rules. It was about whether those rules were being used as a shield. And for viewers, that raised a bigger question. If the rules don't actually prevent disclosure in the way being claimed, then why isn't more being released? But then Goldman took it even further, shifting the focus to something that most people outside legal circles wouldn't immediately think about, the 302 forms. These are summaries of witness interviews taken by the FBI, and according to Goldman, they're not automatically locked away under the same restrictions as other types of evidence. That detail changed everything. Because if those documents aren't bound by the same limitations, then in theory, at least some of them could be released with sensitive details removed. Goldman pressed this point repeatedly, asking why those records weren't being made public. And once again, Patel returned to the same explanation: legal boundaries, restrictions, procedures. But this time, the answer didn't land the same way. The more Patel repeated those points, the more Goldman challenged them, and the gap between the two positions kept widening. Goldman argued that if these documents were truly restricted, then the department could go back to the courts to seek permission to release them, something that has been done in other situations. But according to him, that wasn't happening here. And that's when the tone shifted again. What started as a technical debate turned into something much sharper. Goldman suggested that the issue wasn't inability, it was choice. And that implication hung in the air longer than anything else that had been set up to that point. Then came the moment that everyone remembers, the line that instantly cut through all the legal language and back and forth explanations. Goldman didn't hedge his words. He didn't soften the statement. He said it directly. You are hiding the Epstein files. It was the kind of accusation that changes the energy in a room immediately. Patel pushed back just as strongly, rejecting the claim and defending the actions taken so far. But once that line had been crossed, There was no going back to a calm, technical discussion. The exchange had moved into something far more intense, and the audience could feel it. And yet, even in that heightened moment, the questions didn't stop. Goldman shifted again, this time focusing on video and photographic evidence. Patel explained that much of the material collected over the years was deeply sensitive and could not be released, particularly anything involving victims. That point was acknowledged. There was no disagreement there. But Goldman narrowed the question further, asking whether any material existed that could point to other individuals connected to the case. And once again, the answer was limited, cautious, and carefully phrased. Patel maintained that everything relevant had been used for prosecutions where possible. But for Goldman, that still didn't address the core issue, what the public is allowed to see. At this point, the exchange started to feel less like a search for answers and more like a standoff. Each response led to another question. Each explanation triggered another challenge. And for viewers, it created a sense of uncertainty that only grew stronger with every passing minute. Because if everything has already been reviewed, examined, and addressed, then why do so many questions remain? And if there are still unanswered questions, then what's missing? But what made this situation even more complicated is that the tension inside the hearing room wasn't happening in isolation. Outside of that exchange, reports had already been circulating about internal turmoil within the FBI itself. Stories of agents being removed from positions, then brought back, and then removed again. Reports describing decisions that seemed to shift from one day to the next. And while each individual case had its own context, taken together, they painted a picture that raised concerns about consistency and stability. And that added another layer to everything viewers were seeing unfold. Then something happened that almost never happens. A group representing thousands of FBI agents spoke out publicly. The FBI Agents Association, which typically avoids direct criticism of leadership, issued a statement that caught a lot of attention. According to reports, the organization described certain actions as erratic and warned about the impact of decisions that appear inconsistent or unpredictable. Now, it's important to note that this reflects their perspective, but the fact that such a statement was made at all stood out. Because organizations like that tend to stay quiet unless they believe something significant is at stake. That statement added weight to the broader conversation. It wasn't just about one hearing or one exchange anymore. It became part of a larger narrative about how decisions are being made and how those decisions affect both internal operations and public perception. And when you combine that with the ongoing questions surrounding the Epstein files, it creates a situation where multiple concerns start to overlap. Transparency, accountability, consistency. Each of these issues began to connect in ways that made the overall picture more complex. At the same time, there were also discussions about resource use, travel decisions, and how leadership operates day to day. Comments about private flights and spending choices added yet another angle to the conversation. On their own, those details might seem separate from the hearing itself. But in moments like this, everything becomes part of the same story. Because when questions are already being asked about one area, people naturally start looking more closely at others. And that brings everything back to where it started, with a simple question that didn't get a simple answer. The exchange between Goldman and Patel wasn't just about one set of documents or one legal interpretation. It was about how much information the public should have access to, how decisions about that information are made, and whether those decisions are being communicated clearly. And while both sides presented their arguments, the gap between them never fully closed. So where does that leave things now? On one hand, officials maintain that everything that can be released legally has already been made public. On the other hand, critics argue that more could be done, whether through additional legal steps or different interpretations of existing rules. And in between those positions is the public, trying to make sense of what's known, what's unknown, and what might still be out there. There's also the broader question of trust. Situations like this don't just raise specific concerns. They affect how people view institutions as a whole. When answers feel incomplete or inconsistent, even if there are valid reasons behind them, it can lead to more skepticism. And once that skepticism starts to grow, it becomes harder to address, no matter what information is eventually released. At the same time, it's important to remember that not everything can or should be made public. Protecting victims, preserving the integrity of investigations, and following legal boundaries are all critical factors. The challenge is finding the balance between those responsibilities and the public's desire for transparency. And as this situation shows, that balance isn't always easy to achieve. What's clear is that the conversation isn't over. The questions raised in that hearing are still being discussed, debated, and analyzed. And until there's a clearer resolution, whether through additional disclosures, further investigations, or simply more detailed explanations, the uncertainty will likely remain. Because once a question like this is asked publicly, it doesn't just disappear. It stays in the background, waiting for an answer that feels complete. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. It's not just about what was said in that moment, or even what was revealed. It's about what people are still trying to understand. Because in a case as complex and widely followed as this one, every unanswered question carries weight. And every new detail has the potential to change how the entire story is viewed. So the next time you hear someone say that everything has already been released, or that nothing more can be shared, remember what happened in that exchange. Remember how quickly a simple question turned into something much bigger. And ask yourself, are we seeing the full picture, or just the part that's been shown so far? If you found this breakdown helpful and want more deep dives into moments like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and stay tuned for the next video, because the stories behind these headlines are far from over.